What is up, Scream Team? Zach Cherry here, and in this video I'm going to do a complete plot breakdown of Scream 6, where we will go through the movies scene for scene and analyze story, characters, production, etc., where I will give you my completely unfiltered opinion. Full disclosure right off the bat, this is a very frustrating movie for me to analyze like this, because despite all of its flaws, and believe me, there are many, I still find myself enjoying Scream 6 quite a bit. So obviously you can interpret my criticism however you want to, but I'm gonna go on the record right now to say that I think this is a fine movie. There really hasn't been a bad movie in the franchise as far as I'm concerned, but this also could have been so much better, and that's gonna kind of be the theme of this plot breakdown. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel, toss this video a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on Scream 6. Let's get into it. The film opens on the night of October 29th in a trendy New York restaurant where we meet Laura Crane, an associate professor who teaches horror genre film studies at the local Blackmore University. She sits alone while she waits for her blind date Reggie, who texts her to let her know he's running a bit behind. Just then, she receives a call from him to ask what the restaurant looks like, as he's having a hard time finding it. She goes outside to give him a description of the building's facade, at which point he claims that he believes he got lost and is probably on the next block over. He says that he thinks he can cut down the alleyway, which Laura spots directly across the street from her. However, after Reggie insists that he's in the right place, she still can't see him and starts walking towards the alley to get a better look. He says that he thinks he can see her standing at the other end, but after she waves to confirm that it's her, he claims that the person he sees is not waving back and is actually standing there with a knife. Laura panics and starts running further down the alley, at which point Reggie's voice on the phone changes to the Ghostface voice and mocks her for teaching a subject on horror tropes, yet being stupid enough to wander into a dark alley alone. Slightly confused and unimpressed, she's startled by the sound of people walking by on the street, which distracts her long enough as Ghostface lunges out from the darkness and begins stabbing her over and over again. As her body goes limp and collapses to the ground, the killer crouches down and watches for a moment before removing their mask to reveal themselves as Jason Carvey, a student at Blackmore University. He takes off his robe and stuffs it into his backpack that was hidden behind the dumpster before taking off down the street. On his way home, he happens to pass by a group of his college peers where he spots Tara Carpenter, who tells him that they're all heading to the Omega Kappa Beta party. He seems to be particularly interested in Sam and asks Tara if her sister will be there, to which Tara responds that she wouldn't be caught dead at a frat party. Jason arrives at his apartment where he lives with his roommate Greg, who doesn't appear to be home. He receives a call from Greg's phone, but the caller is using the Ghostface voice, which annoys Jason, as they apparently agreed to not use the voice modulator on each other. It's here where we find out that the two roommates have been planning their own murder spree to finish the movie that Richie started in Woodsboro, with the end goal of killing both the Carpenter sisters. However, Jason begins to suspect that the person he's talking to isn't Greg, and after the caller insists that he's in the apartment with him, he starts to play a game with Jason to guess where he's hiding. This leads Jason to the kitchen fridge where he discovers Greg's cut up body, where Ghostface sneaks up behind him and stabs him several times in the gut. With Jason's dying breath, he tells the killer that they have to finish their movie, where Ghostface responds by saying, "Who gives a fuck about the movies?" before slashing down on Jason to reveal the Scream 6 title card. The first thing I really want to mention here is a positive for me, and that is that the franchise is finally stepping away from stab, like the movies within the movies, and that has kind of been a big point of contention for me in the previous entries, especially Scream 5. There was so much heavy reliance on stab, and it almost got to the point where the movies were, kind of up their own ass because they were just referencing themselves and repeating the same things over that we had seen so many times by that point. And the thing that I really loved about the original Scream is that that was Kevin Williamson's way to honor the horror genre and show us that this movie existed in the same universe as Michael and Freddy and Jason. And once it started to shift more into the Stab franchise, it turned into this thing where it wasn't so much about being in the same universe, it was just more so like, how can we get more and more meta? And I have to say, I think that this movie does succeed in the area of just, being a little bit more flexible in terms of the ideas that they can explore explore because they're not tethered to stab anymore. And there's certainly an attempt to do that with this opening scene. And there are things that I like, in particular Samara Weaving. I really like the fact that she's using her real accent for this character. It kind of gives her a distinguishing flair. I also really appreciated seeing the sort of behind the scenes aspect of the killer, like just everything from their perspective after killing their victim. Obviously, like my headcanon goes crazy for, you know, who killed who scenarios and how everything played out. So it was interesting to see that aspect of it. And I will say that subverting the audience expectation by having the killer become the victim was a very good twist. But unfortunately, I feel like it's wasted on the opening scene here, because this is an idea that if they had played with it, it could have run a lot further throughout the movie, that it would actually tie into the plots, rather than just be a cheap gimmick for the opening scene. For instance, how they could have done this was to not reveal Jason as the killer, and then just let the movie play out with this killer on the loose in New York City who is going after people connected to Blackmore University, and then have this character of Jason introduced amongst the friend group here, and, you know, have them be probably a very obvious candidate to be the killer, but, you know, halfway through the movie, have them get killed off. And then the MO of the supposed killer completely shifts. Like, that would throw us for a loop. And then by the time we get to the end and you have the killer monologuing and explaining that they actually killed the original killer and then just carried on their plan from there because it was convenient, that would be like a huge plot twist that probably nobody would have seen coming. And what's interesting is that we find out that Jason is a huge Dario Argento fan, and one of his movies, Tenebrae, is exactly that same premise. So that would have been a really good way to homage, you know, the types of movies that they are referencing here. But just because it's used up in the first 10 minutes, it's relegated to nothing more than a gimmick. And that kind of brings me to my next point with the opening scene, because it does this sort of like transition of characters thing that we had already seen in Scream 4 with the stab fake outs, and that's probably my least favorite opening. And this one, it's still like rooted in the same universe, but I also kind of feel the same way towards it, because what I expect from an opening scene is to be introduced to a character, establish like an empathetic connection with them, set a tone, build suspense, and then have it finish off with like this grand spectacle of a death scene. And when you have a character introduced like Samara Weaving, and then like 5 minutes in, her character is cut way too soon, it's almost like, for lack of a better term, the movie blowing their load way too soon. Because by that point, the momentum has already reached its height and then dropped down again, and now we're watching the same thing over with this other character, Jason. Because these opening scenes are so short, you have to be really efficient with your time, and when you're staggering things and breaking them up like that, it might be fun the first time you see it, but on rewatches, I guarantee you this opening scene is going to become less and less enjoyable. I want to mention Roger L. Jackson as well as the voice on the phone, because I think he was underused this time. There's absolutely no reason for Tony Revolori to, use his real voice on the phone when talking. That could have been Roger the entire time. What I think they were trying to do was surprise us when the voice turned into Ghostface halfway through. And the thing is, we've been watching these movies for so long, like, you're not fooling anyone. So I think that just limiting how much time we actually got to spend with him kind of diminished the quality of this as well. And then there's even some weird ADR in the instances where Ghostface is like in front of their victims and speaking through the mask, in which the sound quality is exactly the same. Like it sounds exactly as if they're talking through the phone. If they're in person, it should sound different. Like they did it correctly in Scream 2 with Mickey and Scream 3 with Roman. So I don't know why they couldn't tweak that here. It was just really awkward. I don't know if anyone else noticed. So other than having Roger L. Jackson be included more in the phone conversation, and then implementing this twist where there's a killer who has their own agenda that runs for like halfway through the movie, I would have made this entire scene all about Samara Weaving. And since we are setting this in New York, I think that what would have been appropriate is to have this set in a very, well-known public location, just some sort of landmark in New York City. If we're going back to the idea of Jason being obsessed with Dario Argento and just paying homage to that, what they could have done was have Samara Weaving meeting her date at Grand Central central station, only to have them lure her off into a less populated area where they then come out and there's a chase scene that ensues. They end up on the roof somehow. He guts her, hangs her by a wire, and then throws her through a skylight for her to be dangling over top a crowd of spectators. That would have made a statement. And I think that what the problem is here is that they're not thinking about making statements, they're thinking about gimmicks and subverting expectations. And you don't need to do that. You just need to start with a bang, something that's going to wow the audience. We're then reintroduced to Sam Carpenter, who's in a therapy session with Dr. Stone. Sam admits that she's worried about Tara as she doesn't seem to want to deal with what happened in Woodsboro. But Dr. Stone is more interested in getting details about Sam, as she's been coming to him for 6 months now and has barely opened up to him about anything. She admits that she has trust issues, but reveals to him that she's Billy Loomis's daughter and that her boyfriend, who idolized her father, tried to kill both her and Tara the year before. She also reveals that a rumor has been circulating which claims that she was behind everything that happened in Woodsboro and framed Richie for the murders. But more importantly, she's been in therapy because when she stabbed Richie 22 times, slit his throat, and shot him in the head, she realized that it felt right. Dr. Stone ends the session as he claims that he's not equipped to help her anymore and says he's required by law to report this to the authorities. Sam gets annoyed as she isn't a danger to anyone and storms off after telling Dr. Stone that he's just like all the other therapists. When she gets home, she can't find Tara, but her roommate Quinn is there, where she's hooking up with some random guy. Sam notices her neighbor Danny through the window and after checking him out is encouraged by Quinn to go talk to him, to which Sam replies that looking at each other through the window is as much romantic interaction as she's currently ready to have. Sam also finds out from Quinn that Tara went to the frat party, and being concerned for her sister's safety, she goes out after her. At the Omega Kappa Beta party, we're reintroduced to Chad and Mindy Meeks. Chad is hanging out with his dorm roommate Ethan, who's having trouble talking to girls, and Mindy is with her new girlfriend Annika, who asks her if it bothers her being at a house party after almost being murdered at one the year prior. Mindy seems to be pretty confident though, saying the odds of it happening twice are very unlikely. Tara, who is drunk, is invited upstairs by Frankie, one of the sketchy fraternity brothers, which doesn't sit right with Mindy and Annika. They find Chad, who tries to stop Tara from going off with Frankie, but a fight ensues after Frankie manhandles Tara until Sam arrives and tasers him in the balls. Tara is upset that Sam followed her to the party, and after Sam is recognized as the crazy girl from Woodsboro, the whole gang of friends take off. On the way home, Tara fights with Sam over the way she's suffocating her with her overprotectiveness, and admits that she doesn't want the events of Woodsboro to define the rest of her life. Because I know that this is mostly going to be criticism, I do want to point out the things where I think this movie really succeeds, and especially in terms of the writers, because they do a really good job at writing Sam and Tara's relationship. And, you know, the core four in general, but with Sam and Tara especially, because these are characters who have been seamlessly woven into the legacy of the Scream franchise. Like, they could have very easily just come off as being next generation characters, and, you know, really, like, they've taken on a life of their own. And when I see them come on screen, it feels like I've known them forever. Like, you know, they've been in the movies for much longer than they actually have. And I think that's a testament to not only the writers, but also Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera, because their performances are excellent, both of theirs. The problem, however, is that the writers, in order to achieve like these strong character arcs, are sacrificing murder mystery. And, you know, we see this in how obvious it is with like how they telegraph that Sam is going to be framed later on in the movie, just with the internet conspiracy. In all of the past Scream movies, we don't get that information until the monologue at the end. Like, finding out who the killer is going to frame is just as integral as, you know, who the killer is or what their motive is. So when you've already laid out like 1/3 of the plan right out of the gate, it really starts to push the audience's expectations in a certain direction. It's just one of those things that once you get one piece of information, you can very easily start putting together everything else. And that's, you know, why I think the murder mystery aspect of this movie really fails. In terms of the therapist character, Dr. Stone, I think this was another wasted opportunity, because this could have been like a Gus type character for Sam. That's the drama professor to Sydney in Scream 2, who's more of like a support system for her outside of her immediate friend group. Because Sam is a character who, you know, she's very closed off. There's only so much that she's going to share with her friends. And, you know, being in therapy, this was a way for, you know, them to explore some other ideas with her, you know, like the fact that she does have these violent urges. And here, what they do with him is just kind of write him off as this, first of all, like terrible therapist for, you know, how he approached the situation, but he's no more effective than the lady on the street who throws the cola on Sam, because it's the same idea. It's just a less aggressive version of that. So if they had made him a character who we were sympathetic towards because, you know, he actually did like Sam, that could actually work later on, because we know that he's going to get killed in a few scenes, of just something to, you know, really break Sam's character and, you know, push her towards wherever she needs to go throughout the rest of the movie. And then also there's obviously a much different structure to this movie, just in terms of what we've seen in the past. We're getting the events after the title card taking place on the same night as the opening scene, and I respect them for doing something different, but the problem is that nothing that's happening here feels cinematic at all. Like, it's very flat and actually feels like a CW drama, like all this stuff at the frat party. And you can tell that they're like trying to make these parallels to Scream 2, just, you know, with the college setting. But the problem is that it's just being done on a very superficial level, and it's not capturing any of the essence of Scream 2. For instance, in that movie, we're getting the classroom discussion by this point, where people are talking about the inciting incident of the murders the night before, and then we're reintroduced to all these characters as they're doing these power walks through the campus. And here, we're just kind of like catching up with these characters as they're going about their daily routine. Like, it's so uninteresting to me to see these characters just hanging out at a frat party when we as an audience are already so many steps ahead of them, because they don't know that there's been a murder, and we're meeting these new characters completely out of context of them being in a murder mystery slasher at this point. Like, we're wasting all this time with the frat boy who tries to take advantage of Tara. Like, I don't want to see any of that. It's not interesting to me. Just get to the movie. Back at the apartment, Quinn talks to Tara about Sam and explains how after her brother died, her police detective father also became very overprotective of her and transferred to New York City to be closer by. She leaves Tara's room to let her talk to Chad, where Tara thanks him for stopping her from going upstairs at the party. Chad tells her that they're survivors and need to stick together, and intimates that he has feelings for her, which almost leads to them kissing, before they're interrupted by Quinn, who comes back in looking for her phone. Sam sits brooding in the apartment complex lobby when Danny comes walking in. She gets up, if seeming to walk away, but as he passes by her, she grabs him passionately and begins to kiss him. It's revealed that they've been secretly hooking up for a while, as Sam doesn't want Tara or any of her friends to know about them. She tells him about Tara being mad at her and wanting her to let her go, but they're interrupted by Chad, who calls out to Sam from the stairwell to come upstairs immediately. Back in the apartment, everyone is watching a news report about the bodies of Jason and Greg being discovered earlier in the night, detailing the Ghostface masks that were found in their possession. While moving into full-on panic mode, Sam instructs Tara to pack a bag as they're leaving town that night. Tara gets angry again for her sister deciding for her to abandon her college education and flee, but Chad and Mindy point out the coincidence and the fact that Tara did know Jason. Just then, everyone is startled by Sam's phone ringing, but when she looks at the caller ID, it shows it to be Gale Weathers, and Sam presses ignore. Tara tells Quinn to call her detective father to find out what's going on, and when Sam speaks to him, he tells her he's going to need her to come down to the police station as her driver's license was left at the scene of the murder. Sam leaves for the station and allows Tara to come with her, much to her chagrin. However, Sam is called by the killer on their way down, with the call coming from Richie's phone number, which she never deleted as a contact in her phone. The killer tells her that she should be grateful for killing Jason and Greg, as they were planning on killing her and Tara, but insists that they're not on her side, as they want to show the world who Sam really is, a liar and a killer. Just then, Ghostface jumps out from behind, but the sisters manage to fight them off, where they then run around the corner into a local bodega, pleading for someone to call the police. The killer follows them in, where they kill 2 patrons, causing everyone else to run out, where the clerk then tries to shoot at the killer with a shotgun, but after he misses, Ghostface overpowers him and turns the weapon around, shooting him. As Sam and Tara hide in the aisles, Ghostface starts shooting all over the place, causing them to crawl around through shards of glass. They manage to push a merchandising unit onto the killer, giving them time to run out of the bodega, Tara, but as the police arrive and the sisters turn around, the killer has escaped out the back of the store, leaving a ghost face mask behind as a calling card. Firstly, in terms of Tara and Chad's relationship, I do want to say it does feel a little forced, but the thing is that Tara is kind of a blank slate just in terms of what her relationships are to the other survivors, because she had literally no screen time with them in Scream 5. So I think that what works here is that, Jenna Ortega and Mason Gooding as well, can just so effortlessly depict this relationship that, again, we're really just seeing for the first time, but it feels like they've known each other forever. So kudos to them. I also just wanted to say, in terms of Quinn's little expo dump to Tara about her dead brother, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but immediately the second she said that, I knew that she was going to be the killer, her father was going to be the killer, and that her dead brother was Richie. It was handled so ham-fistedly, and the fact that there are no red herrings in this movie, literally there are none, at least until later on, and I'll get to that when we get to that, but it's one of these things where, you have all these extra characters in the friend group who have absolutely no complex development, which, then makes it obvious when the only, little bits of information that come up are the exact clues that are going to lead us towards the end of the movie. It's the same thing with the internet conspiracy. This is instances where you do want to make the neighbor across the hall a suspicious character rather than a love interest to Sam. Or, give Annika some quirks that, make her seem a little off-putting. In typical fashion with these movies, there's not going to be a lot of things that are just randomly put into the script that aren't going to come into play later. And one of the biggest criticisms I've heard from people is that, they don't like the killer reveal in the end. And, I'm just saying that it's because of the seeds planted in these earlier parts of the movie. They did everything incorrectly, and that's why it was, so stupid. In terms of the bodega scene, I'm not really keen on Ghostface indiscriminately killing random civilians, because it kind of takes away from the personal connection that, the killer has with their victim, and there's no mystique to the killer either. There's no thrall in a cat and mouse game. It actually feels very Grand Theft Auto, and that's why I think this scene in general is kind of weak as a horror set piece. There's not really any tension there, mostly because the only people who are getting injured or killed are non-characters, and the two characters that are in the scenario, we know 30 minutes in that nothing's going to happen to Sam and Tara. Maybe if they had Chad and Mindy with them in the bodega, or one of the other friends, it would have added to it. So I just think that this is an instance of the movie just, padding itself with more action. I will say, though, that the fact that this is a very action-packed movie does allow the pace to move a lot more quickly, because we're, bridging all of these scenes with these action set pieces. The sisters meet with Detective Bailey at the police station, where he brings out the Ghostface mask that was left at the apartment crime scene, claiming that it contains DNA from Richie Kirsch. He asks them if they have alibis during the murders, to which Tara says she was at the party with her friends, and Sam was at her therapist, to which she offers to give Bailey the contact information. Sam points out the coincidence of the case being given to the father of her roommate, but after Bailey says he can pass it off to another detective, Sam asserts that that won't be necessary. He tells them that if the killer stole Sam's driver's license to plant at the crime scene, it's probably someone close to her, and asks them how well they really know their friends. They're interrupted when Bailey is informed that an FBI correspondent has arrived, claiming jurisdiction, and when he goes to meet them, we discover that it's KIRBY REED, who is revealed to have survived her injuries from Scream 4 and gone on to become a federal agent who takes a keen interest in Ghostface-related attacks. It's established that Sam and KIRBY know each other from their time at Woodsboro High, where Sam was a freshman while KIRBY was a senior. The mask left at the bodega comes back with DNA evidence of Jill Roberts and Charlie Walker, leading KIRBY to believe that the new perpetrator is a student in a long line of Ghostface killers. Sam declares that she's getting out of town with Tara, but both Bailey and KIRBY won't allow that, as the sisters are now both persons of interest in a double homicide. They leave the station and are accosted by the news media outside, where GALE Weathers approaches them, asking if they believe they're the reason that Ghostface has come to New York City. Sam tries to punch her in the face, but GALE moves out of the way, only to get punched by by Tara instead, who tells her to stay away from them. Gale follows after them, where we discover that contrary to her telling Sam that she wouldn't write a book about what happened the previous year, she went ahead and wrote one anyway, where she made libelous statements about Sam being unstable and a born killer. Sam shames her by asking her what Dewey would think of the book, and Tara blames her for being responsible for Sam's reputation and the killers coming after them. Gale tries to smooth things over by telling the sisters that she spoke to Sydney, who, although sends her love, isn't coming to help them out as she deserves her happy ending. Sam says that they can at least agree on that much, where Tara then chastises Gale for being afraid that without Ghostface in her life, she'll fade away. The sisters take off in a cab, leaving the disgraced reporter behind. In terms of Kirby, I have to say that when it was announced that she was going to be in this, my thought was, what could she possibly do here? Like, to what end is she going to serve this movie? Because Kirby coming back just feels like an embarrassment of riches. It's just too much of a good thing. And really, she's doesn't need to be in this movie. I'm sorry to say, there's really not a role for her here. I think that if she wasn't in it, it probably would have allowed for, some other characters to be expanded upon. Having said that, I love Hayden Panettiere with all of my heart, and every moment that she is on screen, I think that she is captivating. I love watching her. So again, it's another thing that it's just like, I'm annoyed, but I'm also like really happy about it at the same time. I just think that, there was a way that they could have made it work with her in the movie, and again, that's planting the seeds properly at the beginning of her introduction. So, things do work towards whatever goal they're trying to achieve later on. But the biggest issue that I have, with this scene, maybe the whole movie in general, is the assassination of Gale Weathers' character, not to use Ethan's words, but it's true. What they do to her here is outrageous, and I don't know why anyone signed off on this. I don't know why Courtney Cox agreed to come back and play Gale Weathers this way. Essentially, we're seeing the character take 5 steps backwards. She's just become, Scream 1 Gale all over again. It was established at the end of the last movie that she wasn't going to write the book about the requel, and then here we are. Even though they do make reference to it, it just still feels like so out of character for her. Like, I know that Gale is a very complex character, and there's no way that she would completely abandon Ghostface from her life, but there was a different way to do this, and I feel like they could have handled it with a lot more sensitivity. I also don't like the fact that the last time we saw Gale, she was the host of this morning show, and now all of a sudden she's a field reporter. Like, that felt very unnatural and contrived. And then with the way that this scene ends, Tara makes a very pointed comment towards Gale by saying that she's just afraid that without Ghostface in her life, she's just gonna fade away. And literally nothing comes of this. There's no exploration into this idea. There's no payoff to that later on. There's no conclusion to this story arc for Gale. Like, she doesn't even really have a story arc in this movie. So that just felt like a lot of mindless filler in the script, just to, kind of enhance the drama of the whole situation. I didn't like it. While eating breakfast at his home practice, Dr. Stone hears a knock at his door. After getting up to investigate, he sees a dark silhouette standing on the other side of the glass, and as he goes closer to look, Ghostface steps forward and punches through the window to pull Stone towards them, where they then stab him in the nose, killing him. On the other side of town, at Blackmore University, Mindy has assembled all the friends, including the Carpenter sisters, Chad, Ethan, Quinn, and Annika, where she explains to them that this is no ordinary sequel, as it's a sequel to the requel, and therefore they need to examine the rules of a continuing franchise. She warns them that any of the returning characters are expendable at this point, but also singles out the new friends as suspects, with Ethan having juked the roommate lottery to end up in a dorm with Chad, Quinn having a cop for a dad as too much of a coincidence, and Annika for the fact that you can never trust the love interest. Ethan and Quinn ask why none of the Woodsboro kids are considered suspects, suggesting that the trauma they endured caused one or more of them to snap and go on a killing spree. Back at the police station, Detective Bailey reports to Kirby that Sam's alibi of Dr. Stone was killed, with Sam's file having also gone missing. This also comes after Dr. Stone reported his session with her to the authorities, and with an additional Ghostface mask left behind at the scene that contains DNA matching Roman Bridger. Kirby comments about how the killer is leaving clues to the past Ghostface killers in reverse, and after showing Bailey a picture board with with all 9 of the killers and the corresponding crime scenes of the latest victims, they reason that it somehow will all lead back to Sam being the daughter of Billy Loomis. Kirby tells Bailey to warn his daughter about her proximity to the Carpenters, as that could put her in danger, and after she leaves the room to take a private call, he asks one of his associates to call the Atlanta FBI office to dig up any information they can on Kirby Reed. In terms of the Dr. Stone kill and all of that, you know, I'm disappointed for a plethora of reasons, but I think mostly because he was my prediction to be the killer in this movie, and I felt like there was a really good idea there to have him be this person from Gale's past who used to work with her as a reporter, only to have kind of lost out on the opportunity of a lifetime when she ended up being the reporter called to Woodsboro, which, you know, basically launched her career, which then would have sent this hypothetical rival of hers into obscurity. Like, I think that would have been a really fun way, you know, of a revenge scheme for a killer. But, you know, obviously that's a universe we don't exist in, so I have to reconcile with the fact that this is what happens with this character. They essentially give him the Vince Scream 5 treatment of just like killing him off after a scene and a half. But if there is something that I do like about this, it's that there's sort of this like Cruella de Vil homage with the silhouette of Ghostface at the door. That's something I really loved when I saw it in the trailer. But obviously the reason that they killed him was because they're trying to frame Sam again, you know, with her alibi, you know, turning up dead and all that. And it brings up another lazy screenwriting issue that it was the same thing with Scream 5, where the killer's plan makes no sense. And Kirby even calls attention to this when she says to Detective Bailey, like, what did Sam do? Like, kill her own alibi? And it's one of those things that already annoyed me with Scream 5 as to why it didn't make any sense for them to frame Sam as the only killer, because there are so many instances throughout the movie where Sam is being attacked by Ghostface, she's with other people, and then they report it to the police afterwards. So in any scenario where like Amber or Richie in that case, or the Kirsch family here are gonna go to the police and say, it was all Sam, she did it all, and we're just gonna forget about the fact that, you know, there's reports of her being with other people who are attacked by the killer. I mean, I guess I can suspend some disbelief because Detective Bailey is a cop and, you know, he might fudge some of the evidence, but still there's just so many plot holes that come from it. I think that, you know, they could have thought of something a little bit more creative. I don't know why they continue to try to frame Sam. It just seems like it's never going to be something that's successful to the killer, so it makes their plan inherently silly, and I, you know, can't take it serious. In terms of the rules scene with Mindy, I also really didn't like this part of the movie because, again, it's verbatim the exact same scene that we saw in Scream 5. And the thing that like really annoys me about this is that Mindy, you know, has experience now. She's lived through one of these things before, and she's already making the cardinal mistake of revealing the information that she knows to a group of people who she suspects, you know, the killer might be among them. So it really calls into question a lot of the character logic here, because I think that what would have been more appropriate was to see a scene where perhaps just Chad and Mindy had a one-on-one like Randy and Dewey did in Scream 2, where they run through the list of suspects, and she's like, how about Ethan? And Chad will be like, no, he's cool or whatever, and he'll be like, Annika, and she'll be like, no way, you know, something like that, because you're not gonna want to openly accuse who you think is the killer of being the killer, because all they're gonna do is deny it and then know that they now have to kill you because you're on to them. And then in terms of like the theme of this movie kind of being about horror franchises, it does feel very tenuous, and it almost like doesn't justify this film's existence. Like, all of the other movies had a reason for it. I mean, like, Scream 3 and trilogies was a bit of a stretch, but at least like the remake thing worked in 4 and the requel thing in 5. And, you know, I'm not saying that the franchise idea isn't good, but it definitely needed to be fleshed out more. And I think that this is a case where, you know, they could have had a film class discussion. Like, we didn't see any scenes of them in college. Like, this is set on a college campus. Put them in a classroom. Have them talk about film. And then, you know, I wouldn't be me unless I had some gripes about continuity errors, because, you know, it makes my blood boil when I see these. But on the picture board, they have the deaths of Richie and Amber listed as 2022, which is the release date of Scream 5. But, you know, in actuality, we know that that movie took place in 2021. So even like the writers aren't even getting their own continuity correct. And then the other thing is that they put that Mickey and Mrs. Loomis died in 1997, when in fact it was actually 1998, because that takes place was 2 years after the original. But I will say, I absolutely love the fact that they finally made Nancy Loomis canon, because I was getting so tired of people telling me that her name was Debbie Loomis. So thank you to the screenwriters for finally making that official. Later that night, all of the friends have decided to stay together at the apartment for the sake of safety in numbers. Tara tells Chad that he should get out of the city, considering what happened to him last time, but he tells her that he's not going anywhere and refers to himself and the other Woodsboro survivors as the Core Four. They're interrupted when Annika informs them of the news report, which states that sources inside the homicide division have named Sam as the prime suspect in the murders. Tara comforts Sam and apologizes for pulling away so much, as she realizes that nobody can relate to what her sister is experiencing, and after Sam admits that it sucks to be so hated, Chad reminds her that they all moved to New York City together because they're a team. The emotional support from her friends causes Sam to open up and let them know that she's been sleeping with Danny, by which none of them seem to be all that surprised. In Danny's apartment across the way, he's ironing his shirt when he notices Ghostface in Quinn's bedroom, standing over her in her bed. She's seemingly on the phone with her father and doesn't notice the killer, but as Danny tries to get Quinn's attention, the killer goes into the bathroom where Quinn's hookup is waiting for her in the tub. Danny tries to phone Sam, but she ignores the call, and the group then hear a struggle coming from Quinn's bedroom, which they all assume is just her having sex. However, they finally realize what's happening when Danny airdrops a picture to Sam and company of Ghostface attacking Quinn, and they race to her bedroom door, where her seemingly dead body comes flying out, knocking Annika over. Chad and Tara run out of the apartment, but the rest get cornered, where Ghostface slashes Mindy's arm as Sam runs into the kitchen to grab a knife, only to find the knife block empty. Ghostface picks Annika up by the neck, where they thrust her against the wall and stick a knife in her gut, where they then begin to pull the blade upwards. Sam uses the knife block to whack Ghostface in the head, which allows them enough time to run into the bedroom and lock the door. Mindy goes to lock the adjoining bathroom door, but finds the body of Quinn's hookup in the tub and is startled long enough to allow for Ghostface to run around from the other room. They barricade themselves inside the bedroom, where Danny takes a ladder from his apartment to form a bridge for them to cross over the alleyway. Sam goes first, as Mindy holds the dresser against the door while Ghostface relentlessly tries to break their way in. Once she makes it across to the other side, Mindy tells Annika to go next, but she's bleeding out badly and is too scared to attempt it, so Mindy goes instead, where she also makes it across. With nobody holding the dresser against the door, Ghostface is able to push their way through, narrowly missing Annika as she begins to cross the ladder. As she gets to the halfway point, the killer grabs the ladder and starts thrashing it, and as Annika is almost close enough to reach Sam's hand, the ladder flips over, sending Annika falling several stories below, where she bashes her head on the side of a dumpster and dies. In terms of like this movie from the last one, I think that these suspenseful set pieces really add to, you know, making this entry a lot more engaging, and I think that's why I might prefer Scream 6 to Scream 5. However, I do want to say that this scene is kind of awkwardly framed with how it starts, because why is Quinn even having these indiscriminate male callers over? Just knowing that everything that Sam and Tara have been through, there's absolutely no way that Sam is going to allow Quinn to have a hookup come over. And the fact that we don't even see, like, I didn't even know that she was there, and I didn't even know that, like, she had a guy over. Like, that's how poorly it was established. We didn't even see the guy until he shows up in the tub dead later. Which also brings me to another point, because there are 13 kills in this movie, and half of those are non-characters. Some of them we don't even meet, like Greg or this guy. And when you factor in that there's 3 killers who do get killed off, it only leaves 3 main characters to be victims, and 2 of those occur in the opening scene. So really, Annika turns out to be the only character in the movie that we follow and get to know who then gets killed. And I know a lot of people are criticizing the plot armor here and how the Core Four are invincible and all that. And I mean, like, that doesn't bother me as much. What bothers me is the fact that there aren't enough characters who, you know, we can really grow attached to and get to know, and then mourn their losses when they finally do exit the movie. And, you know, on that point too, I want to say, because I've heard a lot of people commend this movie for having like great kills. And I think the fact that, you know, most of them are either off screen or non-characters more so speaks to the volume of them being not great kills. I mean, I'd say that the only one that stands out to me is Annika, because everyone else is just like more so like violently stabbed in quick succession in the gut. Like, I want to see the killer use their surroundings, like what they did with Tatum in the garage in Scream 1. And I mean, like, the fact that this is set in New York City, the city itself should be a weapon against these characters. Like, you can do so many things to these victims and everything is the same. I actually think that this might be, other than Scream 3, the worst movie for kills. And then the Quinn fake out death. I mean, if you were fooled by that, I envy you, because I saw that a mile away. No character in this franchise has ever been killed off screen like that without coming back as the killer. So by that point, like, if all of the clues from earlier on didn't spell it out, this certainly did. And it's kind of frustrating to spend the last half of the movie just waiting for the inevitable. The next morning, paramedics tend to Mindy, who sits with Chad and Tara in an ambulance as a guilt-stricken Sam watches from the street while the police work the alleyway crime scene. Danny approaches Sam to try and console her, but she tells him that someone took their knives from the apartment and that she doesn't know who she can trust anymore. He tells her that she shouldn't trust anyone then, including himself, and walks away from the scene, allowing her to have peace of mind. Ethan arrives at the building and is accosted by Chad, who demands to know where he was the previous night. Ethan assures him that he has an alibi as he was at his econ class, but Mindy asserts that she doesn't believe him and that he's at the top of her suspect list. A despondent Detective Bailey emerges from the apartment as he grieves the death of Quinn, where Sam and Tara comfort him as he explains that he's been taken off the case but is going to continue hunting down the killer. Gale shows up and makes amends with the sisters, and is also surprised to learn that Kirby, who is also on the scene, is now FBI. Gale tells them, along with Bailey, that she did some digging on the first two victims and knows where the masks are coming from. They all follow Gale to an abandoned movie theater, which according to financial records was rented out by Jason and Greg. Inside, they find a shrine to all of the past Ghostface killers, filled with crime scene evidence from all of the murders over the years. Gale reasons that somebody who believes that Sam masterminded last year's Woodsboro murders killed Jason and Greg in order to take over their work as the new Ghostface killer. While looking at the glass encasement that holds her father's robe, Sam begins to hallucinate visions of him, once again encouraging her to give into her darker side. Tara becomes upset with Sam again over being forced into her sister's legacy and wonders when she'll be able to have a normal life again before running off to the upper floor of the theater. Witnessing the fight, Gale asks Sam where their mother is during all of this, to which Sam reveals that she cut ties with her after she told Tara about her relation to Billy, which caused Tara to cut ties with her mother and move away with Sam. Gale shares some personal wisdom with Sam and comforts her by saying that you can always make your own family, even if it's just with one other person. Kirby finds Tara sitting alone and empowers her by telling her about the time from Scream 4 where she almost died, and we find out how she became FBI, as after she recovered from the incident, she channeled her anger into no longer being afraid of monsters by making herself the thing that monsters are afraid of. I think the best part about this section of the movie is these little character moments that we get. There's Kirby and Mindy. I love their kind of like coming together over their fandom and rightfully choosing the best two Friday the 13th movies as well, might I add. Also, just the scene with Gale and Sam, because despite Gale being, you know, completely wasted in this movie, I think that that moment with her and Sam was actually, you know, very poignant. For the first time ever, we really got to delve deeper into who Gale is, you know, outside of the Scream Ghostface killings, and, you know, actually learn something about her past and just that she doesn't have a great relationship with her parents. And then to a lesser extent, there was the Kirby exchange with Tara, where, you know, I guess we kind of are filled in through the blanks of, you know, what happened to Kirby after Scream 4. But even then, I wanted so much more from that. Another plot hole that is really frustrating to me is the fact that neither Gale or Kirby were able to figure out that Detective Bailey was Richie's dad. I mean, like, First of all, Gale wrote the book on Richie Kirsch. She would have had to investigate their families. Like, she already made that mistake in Scream 2 when she didn't know that Debbie Salt was Nancy Loomis. So that would have just seemed like an obvious thing that she would know from now on, to look into the families of all the killers just in case one of them comes back for revenge. And then the fact that Kirby is FBI, and like that in and of itself was not investigated by her, especially since she does say she's investigating Ghostface murders. But I want to talk about the shrine, because I actually really love the concept and the setting of this. And I'm even like okay with like how fan servicey it is, because it's still like, it works within the context of, you know, everything that plays into the movie later. But what they should have done with the shrine is wait until the climax to introduce it to us. So this is what I would have changed in the movie. I would have had it so that, you know, after the exchange between Tara and Gale, where she says to her, without Ghostface, you're just gonna fade away, she goes off and starts doing her own investigating. Like she said, she looked into the financial records or whatever. It led her to the theater. We should have seen that. We should have been shown Gale coming to the theater for the first time, going inside, but in that instance, the room should have been pitch black. Everything should have been covered with a tarp. And as soon as she starts kind of rummaging around, the killer should have returned to the theater, causing Gale to go hide behind something and watch them as they, you know, stage something or whatever. Then they remove their mask, and we as an audience don't see them remove their mask, but we see Gale's reaction to them removing their mask, because this is obviously somebody that she knows, which then causes her to take out her phone, take a picture of it, start sending it to Sam, only for her phone to go off or something, alerting the killer to her location, where the killer then puts their mask back on and starts investigating. And it kind of like would play out the same way that the scene did in Scream 2 of that chase scene of Gale kind of like hiding behind things until the killer finds her and then tries to chase her, and she's almost out of the building. And then I would have the killer catch up to her, and, you know, just as they're about to bring the knife down, I would have the scene end. So we don't know what her fate is. It's left very ambiguous. And then at the start of the third act, that's when the killer can send a picture of Gale or whatever all tied up to Sam and use that as bait to lure Sam and the characters, only for them to get to the theater and then have that be the first time we really see the full scope of what's inside the entire shrine. That would have worked so much more effectively. Detective Bailey announces that he has a plan to turn the tables on the killer, but after Gale enthusiastically includes herself with the group, Kirby forbids her to participate, as she doesn't want any press to be part of an FBI investigation. They move over to Central Park, where Sam and Tara wander around out in the open, as Kirby and the other kids sit inside an FBI van with Bailey discreetly monitoring the scene from a bench. Kirby explains that they're waiting for the killer to call Sam, which she'll be able to track in less than 15 seconds. However, Mindy doesn't feel comfortable with the situation, as her uncle Randy was killed by getting yanked into a van in broad daylight. The killer calls from Richie's phone number once again and threatens that they're going to kill the sisters. However, they admit that they're not anywhere near their current location and quickly hangs up the phone. Kirby still got the trace, and Sam and Tara realize that the call came from Gale's apartment on the Upper West Side. Bailey tells them to hold off as it could be a trap, but they steal his police car and try to race there as quickly as possible. Over at Gale's apartment, she's with her new boyfriend Brooks, where they're waiting for their dinner to arrive when the landline rings. Brooks picks up the phone but passes it over to Gale when he tells her that it's the killer, and she gets him to call the police from his cell phone while she keeps them on the line. However, Ghostface is already in her apartment and kills Brooks by quietly subduing him while Gale is distracted on the phone. The killer taunts Gale by bringing up Dewey's murder before she's startled by Brooks's body getting thrown through a bookshelf. The killer emerges and a chase ensues throughout the apartment as they move out onto the terrace and back inside again. Gale manages to lock herself in the bedroom, where she retrieves a gun from the safe and fires off several rounds at the door as Ghostface tries to break their way through. The landline rings again, and the killer begins to play mind games with her regarding whether they're still in the apartment or not. She moves back out into the living room, and after getting tired of the killer's rhetoric, hangs up and calls them back, which alerts her to their location when she starts to hear their cell phone ringing behind a closed door. Gale fires off several more rounds into the door, but Ghostface barges charges out and stabs her several times. She manages to get the upper hand by throwing them through a glass coffee table, which seemingly knocks them out, but as she goes over to grab the killer's knife and finish them off, they grab a giant shard of glass and stab her in the stomach. The killer takes back their knife and is about to stab Gale again, but Sam shows up with Tara and uses the gun to shoot at the killer, causing them to run away. Before passing out, Gale tells Sam to let Sydney know that the killer wasn't able to get her, and the paramedics arrive on the scene, where they announce that she has a weak pulse, and they need to move quickly if they're going to save her. I'm really sad to say that this is probably my least favorite section of the movie. Part of that might be because I've already in my head invented what I think is a much better scenario for Gale, but also because between Scream 5 and 6, they hit the exact same beats in all the same places. So for instance, this scene is the same basic idea in Scream 5, where Sam was racing to the hospital to rescue Tara, and just like in that movie, the killers here are relying on a lot of coincidences lining up. So not only does Bailey's suggested sting operation require everyone to be on board, but he also needs Kirby to disallow Gale from participating. And then beyond that, it also requires for the phone trace to work, and then for Sam and Tara to also know the exact location of Gale's apartments. And when you take into account all of the witnesses and law enforcement and paramedics who are involved, not to mention that Kirby is probably reporting to her superior, whether or not Quinn is even able to kill Gale, there's still way too many loose ends for the killers to calculate that Sam's being at the apartment will be enough evidence to link her to the crime. It's just really lazy screenwriting, and I think the problem is that they're depending on the heroes of the story to, make all the decisions here, where if you look back on, the Wes Craven movies, it was the other way around. It was the killer who was luring Sydney into a trap. So it is nice that they're giving characters like Sam and Tara all this agency, but it's almost at the detriment of the murder mystery and the story and the logic. I will say that there is a very cute moment between them when they get into the cop car, and there's the question that comes up of, do we put on the sirens? But I feel like all of the stuff that happens in Central Park, again, it's more so an instance of them, trying to draw parallels to Scream 2, but also completely missing the mark. And then in terms of the Gale chase scene and all that, I will say that I really love the fact that she's getting a phone call. This is the first time in the franchise that has happened, and that was a very exciting part of the trailer. Also, just in terms of the actual chase itself, it was very well staged and choreographed. Like, I don't think that there's any issues, but it still left so much to be desired because, again, this is New York City. We're in a high-rise apartment. Like, take advantage of that. Where are the chase scenes up the stairwells, or like the danger of falling off the side of the building? And then also, minor gripe, but why does Sam have to pick up the gun and shout out to the killer before shooting at them? Like, why alert them to your presence? Just pick up the gun and shoot them. But just in terms of wrapping up Gale's story in Scream 6, this was just pitiful. They had this legacy character, and this was just the wrong way to handle her. At this point, I don't even know that I want Gale to come back anymore if this is kind of what they're going to continue doing with her character. And the sad thing is that I need her to come back. They have to resolve this storyline. I need to know what ended up happening to her. I know she's alive, but still. It was just a terrible injustice to one of the franchise's best characters. I just wish she wasn't in this movie at all, to be honest. Sam, Tara, Chad, Mindy, and Ethan are all hanging out around the hospital contemplating their next move. Danny arrives, apologizing for being late, which Tara finds to be suspicious. Mindy admits to being scared, but Sam tells everyone that they don't have to be, as the killer only has a vendetta against her, and suggests it might be better for everyone if they all left and let her face this on her own. Tara refuses to let Sam do that and says that it's her turn to protect her sister, with Mindy adding in that they're all part of a family now, as Chad assembles and cheers them on as the core four. Tara comes up with the idea to use themselves as bait in order to lure the killer into a trap, and enlists the help of Detective Bailey, who suggests that they use the shrine. He tells them that he's stuck at the police station, but that he'll get Kirby to meet them there, and that they should travel in public, as it's less likely they'll be attacked if they're in a crowded place. This leads them to take the subway, which Ethan seems to be apprehensive about, but after getting separated in a sea of partygoers dressed up in Halloween costumes, everyone is able to get on the train car except for Mindy and Ethan, where Mindy keeps her distance, as she's still sure that Ethan is the killer. They get on the next train, but both cars are loaded with people dressed up in Ghostface costumes, and after a long stretch stretch of subway ride where the lights keep flickering off and on, Mindy is attacked by the killer, who stabs her in the gut while everyone else around her remains unaware. As Mindy's train clears out at the next stop, Ethan sees her sitting on the floor bleeding out and rushes over to help her, where he takes her out onto the platform and calls for assistance. Mindy is still alive and chides herself for getting her suspects wrong again, proclaiming "fuck this franchise" as subway security comes to her aid. I will say that the subway car scene is probably my favorite bit in the movie, and I wasn't expecting that because it was so heavily featured in the promotional material, but this feels like the most Wes Craven-esque bit that Radio Silence has done to this point. I'm really excited to get my hands on the 4K for this as well, just so I can kind of go through that subway car and find all of the Easter eggs and references. And again, speaking to the references in these franchises, because there are so many to the point where it gets exhausting, but it works here because this is taking place on Halloween. So of course everyone's going to be dressed up. I thought that was brilliant. However, here we are again to another instance of Sam and Tara calling the shots because, you know, it's decided that they're going to lure the killer to this location. And again, it's just one of those things, like it removes any sense of urgency. Like if the killer is in control, that raises the stakes. That makes it seem like there's a ticking clock. But even without that, it really highlights the terrible decisions that the characters make in these movies, because if the plan is requiring them to trust all of these additional characters like Danny and Ethan and Detective Bailey, where historically one of these extra characters has always turned out to be the killer, it's just like, why would you include all of these people in on the plan if you don't trust them? So again, it just feels very out of character for, you know, any of the core four to initiate some sort of plan which would require them to divulge sensitive information to outside parties. Like they're basically setting themselves up for failure at this point. And then in terms of the fate of Mindy on the train, like I said earlier, I didn't need any of the core four to die. I don't have that bloodlust out for them. But I think if there was going to be one of them that they could have killed off, it probably should have been Mindy. And how this could have played out, because Ethan and Mindy missed that first train, what Sam, Tara, and Chad and Danny could have done was got off at the next stop because they were worried about being separated from Mindy, waited on the platform, and then as that train arrived after Mindy gets attacked by the killer, everyone clears out and they go into the car and they see Mindy slumped over dead. And Ethan is nowhere to be found. It would almost be like a recreation of the Randy scene, you know, where like the van door opens and they see his body and Gale screams. Like that's how they probably should have done the scene. Again, they probably just didn't want to kill Mindy, and I don't blame them. Like I think that it's good to have this unified front of all these characters, but I just wanted to point out that it was a missed opportunity, especially since Ethan like helping Mindy at the end is very like out of character for, you know, what later is revealed with him. So again, it's an instance of the writers doing what they think is misdirection, but really it's just improbable storytelling. Kirby is waiting outside of the theater as Sam, Tara, Chad, and Danny arrive. She tells them that she talked to Bailey and that everything is set up inside for the trap. They're about to go in when Sam turns to Danny and tells him that he should leave because they don't really know him all that well and therefore can't trust him. He's understanding and tells her to be safe before taking off, which Kirby points out was a good call for Sam to make. Inside the theater, Kirby explains that the double gate is the only way in, which will lock on both sides automatically if the killer tries to come inside. Sam asks what kind of weapons they have, but Kirby says she's the only one who gets to have a gun and assures them that they'll all be safe. Sam wanders around while trying to get a hold of Mindy on her cell, but is met by another Billy hallucination, where he tells her that she should know better that she can't trust anybody, which prompts her to open up his Ghostface case and arm herself with his old knife. Kirby disappears, and as Sam goes to look for her, she receives a call from Detective Bailey telling her that they're not safe in the theater, as he just found out from the FBI that Kirby was fired 2 months prior for being mentally unstable. As Sam checks the gate to see if they can get out that way, the lights in the room go down, and the theater projector begins to play a home movie of someone acting out a series of Ghostface murders. In the concession area of the theater, Tara and Chad are engaging in some light flirting with each other when when Chad decides to take the plunge and kiss Tara. She's receptive towards it, and after he tells her he should have done it sooner, she tells him he should do it a lot more. However, when they go in for another kiss, Ghostface sneaks up behind them and stabs Tara in the back. Chad fights them off, and he and Tara run into the theater, where they bump into Sam, who tells them that Kirby is the killer. The three of them try to search for another way out, but Ghostface jumps out at them from the stage, where Chad grabs Kenny's camera, which is on display, and uses it to slow the killer down. They all run down a narrow corridor that leads back to the concession area, where after catching up to them, they're able to get the drop on Ghostface. However, when Chad is about to finish them off with an old-style gumball machine, a second Ghostface appears out of nowhere and stabs him in the back. He falls to his knees as both killers advance towards him, stabbing him multiple times in the torso, while Tara looks on in horror as Sam tries to hold her back. Sam and Tara try to escape them by running back into the shrine, but one of the killers doubles back around to the stage, while the other one follows them through the doors, leaving Sam and Tara stuck in the middle of the room. They arm themselves with bricks, prepared to take both of them on separately, but just before anyone makes a move, Kirby emerges out from behind the stage with a head wound and fires off several shots at the killers, causing them to run for cover. Sam and Tara still suspect Kirby, despite her protests that she was attacked, and they're joined by Detective Bailey, who arrives at the theater aiming his gun at Kirby as they engage in a deadly standoff. He accuses her of murdering his daughter and tells the sisters that she's crazy, but Kirby denies it and turns her suspicion around on him. Just then, one of the Ghostface killers lunges towards Bailey from behind, and as Kirby tries to warn him, he fires several shots at her, causing her to fall to the ground. Ghostface stands next to Bailey as the other Ghostface walks over to stand on his other side, where he tells both of them what a good job they've done, as the Carpenter sisters look on in disbelief. I want to say that I think that the theater here might be my favorite finale location of any of the movies. There's just something about this decrepit, old, creepy, abandoned building that, you know, was a movie house that, you know, just like really is intriguing to me. And again, like I said, it could have been more effective if they had waited till now to reveal it. But after 4 movies of, you know, seeing the finale take place in a house slash hospital, this like finally gives us some variety. Like, it was nice to see a different location, and you know, they couldn't have picked a better setting with kind of like a better motif of all of the past Ghostface killer evidence. I also like that we get to see more than one Ghostface operating together in the same scene. That's never been done before, unless you count Stab 6 at the beginning of Scream 4. My only gripe is that I would have preferred to see like the two killers working in tandem much earlier, because I think that at this point in the franchise, it's not a surprise anymore that there's more than one killer, that they may as well just kind of embrace the fact that you have multiple people and, you know, have them, you know, perform these fantastical kills at the same time. And I haven't really spoken much about Danny at this point either. And I think that the thing is, because I keep forgetting that he's even in this movie. He's such a useless character. And, you know, maybe like as a survivor, you know, he'll get more developments in the next movie if he comes back. But this movie would have been exactly the same with or without him. The only thing that makes any difference is the fact that he had the ladder, but they just as easily could have had the ladder in their apartment and then set it up on a fire escape on the other side of the alley. But I mean, even with him, we kind of hit the same character beat twice, where they have that conversation of, can you trust me or not? I'm just gonna kind of back away and try to be understanding about the whole situation. And it makes no sense why he's even coming to the hospital at that point to meet them, but essentially he just shows up so they could take a subway ride together where nothing happens, and then she's like, take a hike. So if this was like an attempt to, you know, like have a love interest for Sam and, you know, build some character for her, I think it was very unnecessary. I think that just in terms of the practicality of it all, Tara is Sam's love interest in the movie, just as like a sisterly love, that they could have just focused on that. And then Sam could have, you know, spent more time working through the darkness inside of her, which, I mean, just in terms of how it's handled throughout the story is very underwhelming. It doesn't really come into play until the final act. But yeah, I'd say if you're not going to make Danny a red herring or kill him off, I'd just say get him out of here. Like, we don't need him. But then that also brings me to Kirby being this all of the sudden last minute red herring, which I think was a complete failure. They really couldn't have gone about this in a worse way. Having seen Scream 5 and now Scream 6, I'm of the impression that, you know, the writers and directors don't quite understand or, have a firm grasp on how red herrings work. I mean, these are supposed to be intentionally misleading clues, and for her to just pop in and be suspicious all of a sudden when there was literally no seed planted to it at all. Like, there was a lot of suspicion around her surviving and then just being a character that had disappeared and we didn't hear anything about her. They could have really used that to their advantage. Maybe what would have worked better, and I'm just thinking of this right now, is that she would have been an undercover FBI agent, and it wasn't until the final act that it's revealed that she's FBI, and then in that case they could do whatever crazy shit that they want with her throughout the movie, because it would be the twist at the end that she's one of the good guys. As Bailey stands with a Ghostface killer on either side of him, he mocks the sisters for how easy it was to trap them and proclaims, "I expected more from the two of you after what you did to us." The Ghostface standing to the right of Bailey removes their mask, revealing themselves to be Ethan. He also reveals himself to be the detective's son after calling him dad, and remarks on how easy it was to juke the roommate lottery so he could end up with Chad and infiltrate the friend group. Before the other Ghostface reveals themselves, Sam seems to think that it's Mindy, but the sisters are surprised when the mask comes off and it turns out to be Quinn, who's very much not dead. Bailey explains how he was able to fake her death by using a prosthetic for her wound and being the first officer on the scene where he could then swap her out with a cadaver. Bailey pulls out the Billy mask from his jacket and tells Sam that he needs her to put it on, as they plan to kill both of them and make it look like Sam did it all. Believing that they're doing this based on the internet rumor about her masterminding the Woodsboro murders, Sam tries to reason with them by swearing that she wasn't responsible. Bailey, however, states that he knows it's just a conspiracy theory, as he admits that they're the ones who started it in the first place, with Quinn adding in how easy it is to convince the world to believe the worst in people. It's here where we find out that they're actually Richie's family, exacting revenge on Sam for killing him. As they start circling around them, goading Sam to let loose the killer inside her, Tara criticizes Bailey for his parenting skills. He admits to not being a perfect dad, but states that there's a special bond between a father and his first son, and that's why he indulged Richie's love for the Stab movies, personally helping him build the collection of evidence inside the shrine, but then putting the theater in Jason and Greg's name so that nobody would be able to link it back to him. Bailey once again forces Sam to put on the mask, but she instead taunts him by making negative, disparaging remarks about Richie. This causes Quinn to freak out, and as she lunges at Sam with a knife, Tara, who is still holding onto the brick, smashes it against Quinn's face, knocking out several of her teeth. Sam slaps the gun out of Bailey's hand, and Kirby, who has now come to, shoots him several times in the chest. However, he's only knocked down as he's wearing a bulletproof vest. Ethan goes after Kirby, and after pushing her down and stabbing her in her old wound, Sam runs up behind him and bashes him on the head with her brick. She takes the knife out of Kirby's stomach and uses it to stab Ethan repeatedly in the shoulder before arming herself with Kirby's gun as well and making a promise to her that she'll come back with help. Sam and Tara climb up some scaffolding to the upper mezzanine level of the theater, but as Tara is trying to climb over the railing, Bailey shoots at them, causing her to slip and dangle off the ledge. Sam grabs onto her sister's hand as she starts to slip, while Ethan stands below, trying to jump up and swipe at Tara's legs. Quinn runs upstairs and advances towards the sisters with her knife, but after Tara asks Sam to let her go, Sam gives Tara her knife before dropping her down below, where she uses it to stab Ethan through the mouth. Grabbing the gun, Sam shoots Quinn in the head just as Bailey runs upstairs, and after having fired off the last bullet in the chamber, the two of them run at each other screaming, where they launch themselves over the edge of the railing. Bailey is knocked out, and when he comes to, Sam and Tara are nowhere to be seen, and his phone rings, revealing it to be Sam using the voice of Ghostface. Noticing that the Billy robe is missing, Bailey wanders around and starts shooting at things while Sam taunts him from the other end of the phone. While he's distracted, she emerges out from behind the curtain wearing Billy's full costume and stabs him over and over again before removing the mask. As Sam goes for the final blow, Tara walks onto the stage, causing her to have a momentary change of heart. She tells Bailey that her father was a murderer and that no matter what he thinks, she's better than that. But after a long pause of her and Tara reconsidering, she stabs him in the eye anyway, seeing as how he messed with her family. With Bailey dead, Sam and Tara sit down on the edge of the stage, where Sam agrees to let her sister live her own life, while Tara promises to finally face her trauma and go to therapy. As they assure one another that they're going to get through this together, Ethan jumps up for one last scare and lunges towards them with a knife, but Kirby surprises them when she pops up and chucks Stu's old TV at his head, finally killing the last of the Kirsch family for good. I actually don't hate the climax like most people do. Like, the reveal and the motive are terrible, and I understand, you know, why people think this is the worst part of the movie, but I just find it so ridiculous and campy that it's kind of hard to not enjoy, especially in terms of comparing it to the finale of the last movie. I think that the action is handled much more deftly here as opposed to, you know, in Scream 5, where they were dealing with like multiple things happening at the same time, but the editing was really weird and made it feel imbalanced. Here, I think that they streamline the action a lot more, which is impressive considering that there are 3 killers. And even though the Kirsch family, at least at this point right now, aren't really sitting in a lot of people's favor, I do have to commend Quinn. I think that she's my favorite out of all of them. There's just something about that moment after she's had her teeth knocked out and she comes upstairs and just has that evil grin on her face as there's blood dripping down from her chin as she starts to scrape the knife along the railing. That has to be one of the most iconic killer moments for me in this franchise. I will say that the deaths of these killers aren't quite up to par with, you know, how Richie and Amber were taken out, but I will say that the intensity at which Sam and Tara approach the task is a lot more exhilarating than what we did see in the last movie, so points for that. And really, like, I just love watching Sam assume her ultimate form. Like, she's basically an honorary Ghostface killer at this point. However, she is kind of undermined a little bit earlier on when they do the reveal of the killer, before Quinn takes her mask off and she just looks at her and is like, Mindy? Like, why would you even entertain the idea? Like, it was so out of character. And then obviously the killers being Richie's family. Like, that was extremely underwhelming, especially considering that Richie isn't exactly, you know, the type of past Ghostface killer that I think would deserve that level of tribute. But mostly, and you know, I'm once again gonna say this, I'm just very disappointed that this movie just tries to copy Scream 2 on a very superficial level without really understanding the mechanisms of it. Because Laurie Metcalf as Billy Loomis's mom left very big shoes to fill. This really is, for all intents and purposes, the first time we're getting a repeating motive of, you know, the parent or the family of a past killer. Every motive of the killers to this point has been original, which is why that, you know, finding out that this was a revenge plan, it might have been more interesting to explore some other aspects of Sam. Like, she disappeared from Woodsboro for 5 years. Nobody's really talked about her life in that time. Like, she could have made other enemies. Like, there was so much that they could have done. And really, in terms of the Kirsch family, like, I just find it so hard to believe that 1, 2, 3, 4 members of that family would become serial killers. Like, Detective Bailey as the father, I could understand. You know, don't underestimate the power of a grieving father, but for him to convince his 2 other kids to go along with this, that they would just be like, sure, Dad, let's go kill this bitch. Like, realistically, if anyone's parent came to them and tried to recruit them to go on this murder spree, they would most likely have them committed. I'm also a little unclear on whether or not Bailey is a real detective, and, you know, even if he is, how is he working under an alias? Like, why is nobody calling him Detective Kirsch? Like, this scenario that they've invented presents so many plot holes, and I just have so many questions that I don't think will ever get answered. At least with Debbie Salt, I could, you know, buy the plausibility of her posing as a reporter, but this is just, like, next level ridiculous. Police arrive at the theater along with Danny, who embraces Sam after having apparently called in the reinforcements. Outside, Kirby is rolled into an ambulance where she tells the sisters that they're all a family and that they can call her anytime they need. Remembering that Chad was stabbed, Tara starts to grieve for him, but she doesn't mourn for very long as the paramedics announce that they have another survivor as they roll Chad out on a stretcher. Sam asks him how he's even alive, to which he uses his hand to signal the Core 4. Relieved for him to have survived, Tara removes his oxygen mask to kiss him before replacing it when she realizes that he actually still needs it. They're all interrupted by Mindy, also still alive, who comes running up to the theater where she frantically tells them that the killers are Ethan and Detective Bailey, with Sam letting her know that Quinn was in on it too. Mindy is upset that she missed the monologue again, but gets into the ambulance with Chad where they're taken off to the hospital. As the ambulances drive off, off, Sam's mind wanders away from her, and it's revealed that she took Billy's mask and was hiding it inside her jacket. She takes a long, hard look into it before Tara snaps her out of her daze by asking if she's coming. Sam throws the mask down on the street, and the two sisters walk off into the morning, leaving behind another chapter in this terrifying legacy. There is an end credit scene for anyone who did miss it, which I do kind of love because I agree with the sentiments completely. But essentially, it's just back to the Mindy explaining the rules bit, and she says, not every movie needs to have a post-credit scene. I can only imagine that there were all these like disappointed people who are waiting for the scene to come up and expecting like after the police leave the theater, you see like black boots walk onto the scene to like pan up and show us that it's Stu. But just getting back to the core four, I have to say, I'm not salty about them all surviving. I mean, even though it is pretty ridiculous that every single person who was actually connected to Richie's death happened to survive, it just really speaks volumes to how badly these killers failed at their plan. And I guess just like maybe in terms of Chad, they didn't have to stab him as much as they did, just to maybe make it a little bit more believable. Because at least with like Dewey in Scream 2, we found out that he was stabbed in some old scar tissue and that's how he survived. But with Chad, like in Scream 5, he was stabbed like in the back and in the side, and literally here he's getting stabbed in his chest by two killers. So yeah, like maybe if they had toned that down a little bit, it wouldn't have been as egregious. But I think I have to say that despite all of my criticisms, because I know it sounds like I'm being very negative, I still have a really fun time with this movie. I think that this is probably one of the more suspenseful entries, and in terms of like the character work that they do for the core four, that's all great. But in terms of like the other characters and a lot of the other aspects of this movie, I think that, it probably ranks a lot lower for me. I could have used more New York. I think that, that was kind of the draw for the concept of having this movie set there, that, we definitely should have seen something, a little bit, just even if there was one set piece that was in like a major New York environment, it probably would have elevated this for me. In terms of this new creative legacy that, Radio Silence and James Vanderbilt, Guy Busick are creating, I, had a lot of issues with Scream 5 just in terms of, what I think is very lazy screenwriting, and my trepidations coming into this movie were that they were going to kind of double down on those things, and sadly they kind of did do that here. There was definitely a better script that could have been formulated, but I'm willing to admit that I have some very old school sensibilities, so it might just be that I'm no longer the core demographic for the Scream franchise, which is kind of sad. Having said all that, I am still very excited to see what direction this franchise goes in with Scream 7 and beyond, because I still don't think that there is any bad Scream movies, not a single one. I want to thank a few of my Patreon supporters like Autumn Williams, Mike Taylor Hill, Sarah Burt, and Ashley Summers. If you want to see even more Scream-related content, you can check out one of these playlists right over here. Until next time, I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.